What is going on here?
The Bitcoin bulls are back.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what's going on here. This crazy, fascinating interview between this gentleman and Kevin O'Leary, the intellectual Bitcoin bull versus bear case, which I'm super excited to break down. But I'm also going to give you my opinion, which I know you all hate so much when I talk about how much I dislike Bitcoin. I do know a ton of people making a lot of money right now, and I got to high five those people, but I'm still going to have my adverse opinion. So let's jump right into this. All right, ladies and gentlemen, before I break down this awesome video, this interview, it's nice to see that CNBC can have people on here that can sit down and have a real conversation without somebody getting their back up or their panties in a bunch. And I want to talk about the quick history, the overview, in my opinion, of Bitcoin itself. Now, I have a problem with Bitcoin, and that's the fact that I say every time I bring up literally the fact that Bitcoin has been based on the illegal markets and illegal pump and dumps, and it is the exact result of many issues. And somebody on every forum will always argue the fact that, well, currency has been manipulated. The banks, the Federal Reserve, gold and silver are manipulated currencies, and they'll keep giving you these nonsensical things that people, obviously, I'm not arguing the fact that that might not be true, but it's the fact that Bitcoin was created for one reason and one reason only, and that was a peer-to-peer human currency that had nothing to do with commercial governance or any kind of basically overseeing control over it. It was just going to be a person-to-person currency. Genius idea, you would think, but a lot of the reasons for Bitcoin aren't originally for what most people would think. Now, I want to talk about a lot of different things, but I'm going to scan through this real quick because I don't have time, and I don't want to waste your time. Back in the early 2000s when Bitcoin was created, it was used for something mainly called the Silk Road. The gentleman that started the Silk Road, which was an online illegal marketplace, was worth $400 million in Bitcoins by the time he was arrested, and I can't remember the exact day of that, but you can look into the history and watch the film on it. Fascinating documentary. I guess, it launched in February of 2011. So this launched in the February of 2011. It was Ross William, I don't know what his name is, but he got busted. And like I said, by the time he got busted, worth $400 million in Bitcoins. Today, if that guy was still holding on to those Bitcoins and didn't get arrested, he'd probably be one of the wealthiest Bitcoin holders of all time. Now, this is what kept Bitcoin alive, was people trading it in these markets. This is where it was dominant. Forget the innocent person that thought he was buying something that was like an asset that he was going to hold on to that one day might go up over time. No. The reason Bitcoin became worth so much money was because of companies like this. Now, moving forward to today, I want to talk about something called a pump and dump. What is a pump and dump, guys? Well, if you Google it, essentially a pump and dump is when a group of investors promoting a stock, they put a bunch of money and hold on to it, literally pump the hell out of it till it gets to where they want it, and then leave everyone high and dry and pull their millions, if not billions, of dollars out. Which, let me show you a crazy pump and dump. You think Bitcoin's crazy? You really do? I want to take a quick peek at this chart right here for dries. Back in my day trading days, I day traded stocks like this because they were pump and dump, volatile pieces of trash. Now, let's talk about a company. That's right, this chart, I can't tell you how accurate it is, but Google seems to think that this chart went from being worth $100 million. Could you imagine paying $100 million for stock? And then literally within less than a year, well, a few months actually, this company went to being worth $1.2 billion a share, 1.3 at the high apparently. So literally, let's see, from the month of April of 2007 to the same year, and we're just heading into November of 2007, you could have made $1 billion. You literally could have made $1 billion. Does that sound weird and wrong? Literally within a few months. Imagine making a few $1 billion on a company that only has a forward PE of 18 right now. I wouldn't think so either. But I'm showing you this chart because Bitcoin went through the same process. Now, Bitcoin is not like a stock. It's not exactly something that is easy, in my opinion, to pump and dump. But the way they pump and dump a Bitcoin, because if we look on average right now, I think there's about 16,700,000 Bitcoin in existence. And this number is wrong because, no, this number's right. This is 16,700,000. So essentially, if you times that when the price was sitting around $4,000, you'd end up with about $66 billion, 800 million, and so on and so forth. So essentially with $66 billion, you and me will never move the price of the Bitcoin because it's just way too much. But when you have something like Bitfinex, I'm sure you've heard of a Bitfinex, that thing we can all trust, even though the owner recently lost $850 million in an offshore account that we have no idea where it is. And now they're fighting to raise $1 billion. And in the same process of this court case coming into hearing where they have to prove they have money to back their literally back up their Bitfinex owners. Because if you don't know what Bitfinex is, it's a 1-for-1. So essentially, if you buy a Bitcoin, they back it with the US dollar. But now that they're getting called into court to prove this, all of a sudden, they're missing $850 million of, that's right, the money that people put into Bitfinex. And this is a really fascinating thing because the few companies right now that have billions of dollars controlling Bitcoin, you really don't think that these guys could go in. And when this guy's going to court, he has to now prove, I don't want to get into this story. This story is very lengthy, but I've got an interesting place you can go to learn more about it. There's a video by Stephan, which I'll recommend at the end of this, that you should watch because it really goes in depth about why Bitcoin might be on a rally. And it has to do with these guys going to court. But when you have billions of dollars, and even if you could buy $1 or $2 billion worth of Bitcoin and hold on to it, what you're going to do to this price is going to be staggering because there's only 66 billion in existence and cash equivalent to Bitcoins that exist. So if you could buy a couple $1 billion worth of this and just hold on to it, it would seriously affect the price of a Bitcoin. So let's get into this video that I find so fascinating, and it's less polarized than the shit that I'm spitting out right now. So let's just take a quick deep dive, shall we? Let's turn the volume up for you guys.
Look, yesterday CME Bitcoin futures, $1.2 billion in volume. A lot of these exchanges are seeing all-time highs in volume, and I think that we've seen the bottom of the bear market.
But why? And who are these people?
Yeah, I think there's two things. So one, definitely institutions are starting to come in. You see Fidelity announcing that they're going to start their custody and trading backed, set the deadline for July. But retail also is coming in, right? And I think what you're seeing is two things. One, it's a very scarce asset. We're about a year out from the halvening, so it's going to get about half as scarce in the monetary schedule.
That sounds really exciting.
Historically, that's been a big moment in terms of really is a price driver because it reminds people that there's only 21 million of these.
It's just an arbitrary thing, right? Cut it in half in terms of units.
Now, this argument I find is kind of funny because in Kevin O'Leary's mind, he thinks it's kind of arbitrary that this is just a thing that we believe is worth something, which it is. But at the same time, this guy's talking about the happening. With all the hype around Bitcoin right now, it's going to be running to the point where there's going to be no more Bitcoin made. And that's when things get really interesting with this currency. But let's just keep going.
Reset every 4 years. Basically, the amount that is created every 10 minutes gets cut in half. So right now it's 12.5 Bitcoin every 10 minutes. In May 2020, it'll get cut to 6.25. So if you believe in scarce assets, that's a big moment, and we're about a year out from that. And then the other thing I'd say is I think that the trade war actually has a little bit to do with it, right? This idea that we're watching, essentially a trade war play out on Twitter.
I think that is so wrong. Gold is barely moving in this trade war, by the way. And again, I want you to say that if gold's barely moving, I don't think it's a driving factor for Bitcoin. Just throwing that out there.
You look at a non-sovereign currency, and I think that there's some kind of safe haven.
Flip that around, though. If this trade war gets solved, does Bitcoin go down?
It could, right? I think that the big thing here is if you look at the macro trend, Bitcoin has seen 3 drawdowns over 80% in its lifetime, in the last decade, but it is the best performing asset. And one of the corollaries I draw is if you look at Amazon stock, right? So Amazon's drawn down over 90% twice. The intra-year drawdown is over 30% on average, right? So it's a pretty volatile stock in that sense. Bitcoin's done very similar things, but what it continues to do is set new yearly lows, right? So don't look at the highs, look at the lows. And again, it's just supply and demand. If you have a scarce asset and demand increases.
Mr. Wonderful thinks it's worthless.
Well,
He called it garbage this morning.
I want to explore yeah, I did say that. I want to explore the idea that there's nothing here except...
It's a thing that a lot of us say, especially the Bitcoin bears here, because I hate Bitcoin. In my mind, it is the definition of trash, but when you look at the price targeted to it and what people are willing to pay for it, there is an attribution at this current time in reality where it's not just trash. There's real monetary value behind this. So let's keep going.
Raw speculation. No different than when I go to Las Vegas and put my money on black or red on a roulette wheel, because where is the intrinsic value inherent in deploying real capital, let's talk real money here, and putting it into Bitcoin as a storage of value? I get gold. For 2,000 years, including the Romans, they saw value in owning that as an asset class. Tell me why this, which is basically a digital game, that's the way I look at it, has any intrinsic value. When people actually put real money into this, they make no interest, they can't pay their taxes with it, the regulators don't like it, which is always a problem for compliance. And where's the long-term value? Just this idea that they're going to cut the number of units in half, that's such a scam. Like, that's just totally BS.
So I would say two things. One is it's disruptive technology. So if you look at it from a technology standpoint.
But that also has an odor of BS to it.
Look, everything that's new seems different, right, in the beginning. And I think what you've got to realize is with Bitcoin specifically, money is a belief system. So the U.S. dollar, the only reason why you and I use it is because we believe it has value. So if I give you $1, you give me a good or service in exchange. Right. We believe that it has value. Bitcoin.
Now, I don't like this argument either for a very good reason, and that is the fact that there's a big difference between a U.S. dollar and a Bitcoin and the way the technology is run. Now, a U.S. dollar is backed by the Federal Reserve. When you put it in a bank, the bank is backed by a federal, even in Canada, because I am Canadian, it is backed by the Treasury. Literally, money here it has a trust attached to it. It's like an emotional trust. I don't know how to say this, but it comes with its own girth globally, and it's much more stable. And let's just put it in perspective that if a Bitcoin was used as an actual currency, like people want to think, what people used to think it was, you can't have a currency going from 3,000 to 8,000 because that would change the price of products and it would go with inflation. Go look at like a Zimbabwe dollar that went to $1 billion, where like the thing of bread cost $1 million. Like, you can't have that kind of inflation. It's kind of friggin' ridiculous. And you can't use it as a comparison. It's not a one-to-one comparison. It is its own thing. So let's just keep going here. That's just my opinion.
Has value because two people who exchange it believe it has that value. And what we're seeing is the volume, right? Look at people using it. That's ultimately what matters.
What about all the other crypto crap? There's lots of other coins.
I believe Bitcoin is the king and is going to stay the king for a very long time.
So I taught a class at Harvard 18 months ago that young people in that class challenged me. I put $100 into something called Coinbase, which is a wallet thing. And
you buy Bitcoin?
I bought them all. I bought all the crypto crap. I put $100 in. It's now worth 30. That's a 70% loss on my crypto crap. Now, I bought them all. I think that really sucks. And I think people should understand today.
This is something people really, really have to understand. You will only ever hear the bulk cases of people that make money. Those are the cases that I hear, but we never hear the cases of where people lose money for one specific reason. Nobody likes losing money. Nobody likes talking about losing money. That's why I hope you watch this channel, because I will always tell you if I've lost money in one of my investments. But that is what you really, 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 really need to grasp here, guys. In that pump and dump, a lot of people lost money. And for some reason, you can go on YouTube and you don't hear about it. You literally see nothing because those people are embarrassed. I know people that have bought farms with their Bitcoin. I know people that have bought really nice cars with their Bitcoin. They traded them in at the right time and got out of it. But you got to understand, those stories are far and few between, because for them to have that money, they had to sell it to somebody else, usually at a loss. But let's just keep going.
The hot digital is Bitcoin. Tomorrow it could be whatever, right?
Again, I think that Bitcoin, the reason why Bitcoin is getting so much attention, it's the best performing asset in the last decade, right? It's drastically outperformed S&P.
That is true. That actually is not arguable. It has been one heck of a performing asset class.
Every other kind of financial asset that's out there. And the second thing is the institutions are coming in because Bitcoin is actually a better store of value. It's more transparent and more secure. So
this is not exactly true. When they say institutions coming in, you notice that he mentioned that some stores are now letting them accept Bitcoins. When they accept those Bitcoins, they're literally converted to cash. None of these companies, including Amazon, are showing Bitcoins on their balance sheet.
So regulators, they actually like Bitcoin in the sense of law enforcement can track criminal activity, right? Every single transaction is done on a public ledger.
I'm not sure the law enforcement loves Bitcoin.
I've interviewed a DA agent who came on, and they would love for criminals to use Bitcoin over U.S. dollars and cash, right? It's much more traceable. And so what law enforcement is saying is they want these digital currencies used, Bitcoin specifically, because of the public nature of the transactions, easier to track the criminal activity.
After the fact.
After the fact, yeah, of course. Well, U.S. dollars, you can't track it before or after.
Last time this had a big run up to 20,000 and people started talking about assets with it, the SEC was handing out subpoenas like birthday cards.
They were doing it for the ICOs. So ICOs are essentially people who took the concept of a blockchain or a cryptocurrency token, and they're using it for fundraising for companies. And so you can imagine if you go out and solicit funds from investors and you do nefarious things, the SEC cares and they want to come talk to you.
That was basically fraud. I mean, you're talking about instances of fraud. And the fact of the matter is Bitcoin has been acting pretty well.
This guy, oh my goodness, when he says the FCC's been coming after him, and he kind of dodges it really nicely by saying, yeah, but those were other cryptocurrencies. Those weren't Bitcoin. But actually, yes, Bitcoin has been the best performing asset because it was the result of some of the biggest pump and dumps in human history, people. Please grasp the reality of the literally the gravitas of the insanity that what happened to Bitcoin on its last run up. BitConnect. Did we miss BitConnect? Gladiacoin. There was a handful of billion-dollar pump and dumps that took Bitcoin to a high that even the tulip phase 1,000 whatever years ago couldn't have even persisted on seeing. I don't know if that was 1,000 years ago. It's probably like a couple hundred years ago or something. I think it was in the 1800s, wasn't it? Something like that. Anyways, you have to understand, guys, it made Guinness World Records, the pump and dumps that took Bitcoin to the level that it went to, just so you know what you're dealing with here.
In respect to the recent bad news hitting the sector, we had a hack of Binance, and then we also had the New York AG bringing charges against Tether and Bitfinex, and the coin has done
Melissa, if it's a real currency,
well.
why can't I pay my taxes with it?
You
Why
can.
can't the IRS take it?
You can. In the state of Ohio, they accept Bitcoin as for taxes, and there's other states that are working on it now.
Federally, you think it'll ever get there?
For sure.
Wow, you're an optimist.
And the reason for this, and it's so ridiculous. I love when he says this. The only reason is because that there is so much volatility in it, and it's so liquid that when they get it, trust me, it gets sold. Nobody is holding Bitcoin. Just remember that. When they say, oh, yeah, they're accepting it on the immediate conversion to cash. Just understand that, right? Yeah, we'll take your Bitcoin, but please convert it to cash for us, right? I mean, come on.
When? I'm not in the business of making bets on the federal government's regulatory decisions.
Do we hit the past highs again?
I definitely think that we will, right? Again,
What sort of time frame?
Look, that's the hard part. The way that I think to look at this, it's a non-correlated asymmetric return asset. And we definitely, in my opinion, we've hit the bottom of the bear market. We've now entered into this bull market. Historically, about a year out from that halvening period is when that kicks off. It wouldn't surprise me if we enter kind of a 2 to 3 year bull market now. And 20,000, I think, will be a blip on the radar, just like previous past highs were.
Only Bitcoin, Bitcoin. No other crypto crap.
I'm not here to talk about anything else but Bitcoin.
It seems you would think that if it's all boats would rise in this tide of crypto.
So for your portfolio, here's the number one thing I can tell you as to why you should own Bitcoin. It's a non-correlated asymmetric return asset that the value drivers of all of your equities, everything else is tied to earnings, GDP, interest rates, etc.
The problem is that Bitcoin's not tied to anything.
Well, neither is U.S. dollars, and how big is your cash position?
You know, I look, I love your optimistic view of it. You haven't changed my mind at all. It's still garbage.
Okay, so we're just going to leave it there. Now, I don't like that last statement because I hate when people try and sell technical. When you have to sound technical to sound smart to sell your idea, you're already in the wrong basket, in my personal opinion. I kind of laugh that he's just like, oh, well, it's asymmetrical to this, and essentially because they don't show earnings or anything, and the money just comes from nowhere because people are just willing to pay more for it. It's its own asset that you should have in your portfolio. Now, I used to have $30,000 worth of gold in my portfolio. Now I have zero. Because I hate things that don't cash flow. If you are a passive income investor, I honestly, in my personal opinion, I can't tell you where Bitcoin is going to go. It could skyrocket well beyond, but it's hard to tell what is real attention and what isn't. Somebody like a couple whales trying to pump and dump. A few billionaires can step in and say, let's just buy and hold these and see what the market does, because every time this thing jumps, everybody talks about it like there's no tomorrow, as you can clearly see all over the world. And then they might just dump it again, guys. We could see this being a dead cat bounce. We could see this thing in the short term basically being a bottom where a bunch of whales are coming in, and it's just going to tank it farther down. And I could be horribly wrong. This thing could keep going, and we could see it skyrocket up. All I know is that this has been the most fascinating thing in my life to watch. Isn't that sad? I find it incredible to see what is going on with this, and I think it needs to be gawked at like it is. I think it's a beautiful thing to watch, and it's fascinating that something like this can exist in the 21st century. So let's keep enjoying it. Again, if you are one of those people that isn't a nut job that thinks they have to argue with me and hate me because I don't agree with your opinions, let me know in the comment section below. I'd love to know if you own Bitcoin. Have you made any money on it? What's your personal opinion on it? I have a long history with this, as you can tell, and if I bought into this when I was initially introduced to one of the pump and dumps a couple of years ago before Bitcoin took off and it was still worth only a couple $1,000, I could have made a lot of money, absolutely. But I didn't, and it doesn't fit my investment thesis or my morale, but it might fit yours. So let me know, guys, but stay cool, stay awesome. I hope you enjoyed this video.